have a very exciting guest, Olivia Morris. She is a creative powerhouse. She's a film producer. She started her own production company. She is a world of wisdom, and I'm so happy to have her here today. Hi, Olivia. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm good. It's been a very busy summer, but it's been a really great and productive week for me.
That's amazing. I'm glad we're doing this today. I have to ask you this because I've heard so much about how much you love tea. So, what is your favorite tea?
Yes, I really love tea. And you know what? I have a friend of mine that calls me a tea alchemist, which
Oh,
basically means that I'm able to really find any tea or unique blend for any sort of imbalance or illness or anything like that, or just mood, personality. So I don't have a one size fits all favorite type of tea, but right now, because it's summer, I'm really into iced tea. So I would say there's a white coconut cream iced tea at my favorite bakery. That is like one of my all-time favorites. I could drink it all day, every day, all summer.
that sounds delicious. Thank you
It's
for
really
sharing.
good.
Yeah, I can't wait to try. So, I want to kind of go back into your childhood inspiration. What were some films that you loved growing up? What influenced you at that age?
Yeah, so when I was really little, a lot of people don't know, but I actually started off as a performer. And so I used to do professional musical theater and sing and dance and act and
Wow.
play instruments. Like I was a
Mhm.
very artsy kid. And so I would say the first movies that really influenced me, other than Disney movies, which I think is very common for 90s
Mhm.
babies, I would say were musicals. I think The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz. I mean, I any musical I could watch and literally know every single line of dialogue and song like after watching the movie once or twice. Like I was like it was really easy to memorize things. But I think The Wizard of Oz was one of those movies when I was five that I watched almost every single day.
No, that's so cute. I love that and such a good movie. There's so many great moments of like just triumph and success in that movie. And so many good quotes. So that's a really good one. I love that movie too. But
Yeah.
I think I have like a few other that I obsessively watched a little bit more. I had a weird obsession with like Cinderella. I like watched that far too many times. It's like
Yeah,
probably
Cinderella's
making a bad
good.
influence.
Cinderella's good. And you know what? I think with both Cinderella and Wizard of Oz, you're really able to use your imagination. And I think as a child, that was something that was really, really important to me. And I think the whole idea of fantasy and make believe and making a wish and a wish can come true, like all of those things were really ingrained, and instilled in me at a really early age. And so I found a love of storytelling, yeah, when I was like in preschool.
That's amazing. I think it's a great feeling to know that you love something and to carry that forward into your adult life and your professional career. That's pretty rare. I think a lot of us kind of lose sight of what we really loved when we were young and maybe end up doing something completely different, maybe fall in love with something else. But I think it's great that you've had this love affair with storytelling. It makes it really inspirational because I think you've followed through like more than 100% from what I know about you. So now I want to kind of fast forward into maybe like high school or like college. At that time, did you know, like what was your thought process of going into entertainment? Did you have an idea of how to approach that, or was that like a foreign thing, growing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually always approached the entertainment industry as a business, even when I was really young. I was also, as creative as I was also incredibly academic. I was very nerdy. I loved, loved, loved school. And so there was never a question in my mind if I was going to either like pursue the arts or go to school. I always knew I'd have to find a way to combine the two loves. So in high school, my freshman year, I actually went to a professional art school, and it was a boarding school, which is actually really cool.
Yeah.
And I got to sing and dance, and I was in the orchestra, I was in the choir. I did the play, I did the musical. It was so much fun all year round. But the only thing they didn't have was access to cameras. So there was no like photography class or film class. And I realized that I really wanted to get into camera work. And so I ended up going back to public school and setting my sights on film school. And although I had come up as an actor, even as a teenager, I realized that going to acting school doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a successful acting career. And I didn't necessarily want the uncertainty. I think so much uncertainty already comes with an arts career. And so I decided to go to film school instead because I figured I would be able to just have a more well-rounded understanding of the industry, and maybe there'd be something else I'd fall in love with. And I took a class, it was my freshman summer, so the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. And it was, just like a 1 or 2 credit course, almost took it on a fluke, but it was some sort of like intro to development course. And most people don't know what development is. I think even people in the industry don't really know what it is or how to get into that field. But I had a professor who was a development executive full time at MTV, and she taught this class as an adjunct. And basically, she explained, development executives are the execs who are able to basically find new talent, new shows, and shepherd them all the way through the initial idea, through the script to screen, and all the way through production, and then launching it. And a lot of execs also get to stay on the show for the life of the show. And at that point in film school, you really are just like on set and you're doing short films and you have all these crazy hours, and it just didn't really fit for me. It was fun, but it didn't really feel like a profession. And so learning about development, it was the first time where I felt like I could blend my creative side and my analytical side. And it just honestly was a perfect fit. And so every internship, every assistant job from that point forward was always within development. And yeah, that's really how I got my career started. But it's always been a real focused, intentional effort. Yeah, since I was really young.
I think that's part of why you go to college. You have an idea of what you want to do, but you're there to be influenced and learn more about a broader spectrum of what you're interested in, and then you can figure out what you want to do with your career path and kind of find that first step. So I think that's great. Even with my engineering career, that's kind of how it was for me. I was like pretty academically strong, and I knew I wanted to do something like math and science, but I didn't even know like anything about Boeing, or I didn't know anything about like, oh, and I didn't even know what an internship was until I got to college, and like I
Hmm.
learned about it through like my older my classmates, and I didn't even have like a resume until like the day before the career fair. Like I didn't even know what a career fair was. So that's part of the
Yeah.
process. And like not everyone comes from a background where they have all these things like explained to them in high school or like younger than that. Sometimes you kind of have
Mm.
to like fumble through it a little bit and figure it out for yourself, and have the the faith and the confidence that you can figure it out, and like you're gonna be fine, and you can always change it up later and things like that. But
Yeah, and it's
that's
and it's
great.
tricky too because we're so young when we're making all these big decisions. Like we're told to come up with a career path and we're 17. You know what I mean? So it's like for most of us, our biggest accomplishments were like, I got my driver's license, you know what I mean? Or I got asked to prom. Like the stakes
Yeah.
are completely different when you're a teenager. And I think
Mhm.
so much of finding your career path is just having curiosity and enthusiasm, and just like a hunger to seek out information. I think one of my favorite qualities, especially in my younger self, was that I was always seeking out information. I was never nervous about reaching out to people and setting meetings. And the more powerful, the better. I was like, I don't care if you're a president, I don't care if you're a CEO, if you're a board member, like I'll reach out to you just like you're my teacher at school. So it served me really, really well. And it's something that I notice, I talk to a lot of young people now, whether they're interns or in school, and a lot of people are really, really shy. I think a lot of it has to do just with socialization and social media. I think it's made a lot of people pretty insecure and just not as comfortable using their own voice and just like, creating real relationships outside of the apps. And so that's something that I really try to help instill in younger people is like, it's really important knowing how to, send an email or ask for a coffee, or just like do research about people before you meet them. Like a lot of those things, yeah, you're not necessarily taught, but those soft skills are critical no matter like what your industry is.
Yeah, I think that's a really great message. It makes me want to think of this one thing that I tell myself, and I've, mentioned it to other people as well, when they have that hesitancy of reaching out to people who are, really successful or whoever you're, finding really inspirational. I think one thing to remember and to add to what you've mentioned is that that person, they're a person, they're human, they're just like everybody else. I think if you approach them with that kind of like kindness and respect, they're gonna be more open to talking to you and sharing their experience. Besides, people love talking about their experiences in their life, and they love
Yeah.
being able to give back. And that's something that I think a lot of people maybe forget because you're so intimidated by like, oh my God, did I have a million followers or like whatever it is that's stopping you from approaching them.
True that people love sharing their stories and giving back. And I think the other thing to realize too is so often we don't think to reach out to people until we want something like, oh, this job is available and they work at that company, let me reach out, or oh, I need a recommendation letter for X, Y, and Z. But a lot of times, the best time to reach out is when you don't have something that you need. So you can really just start to build like a one-to-one connection. And then in that follow-up, you can always, say, hey, by the way, I'd love if you introduce me to this person, or if you recommend me for this role. But I think upon that first reach out, it's better if, there's no strings attached, because then I think people can tell when it just feels transactional.
Right.
And sometimes it feels like they're being taken advantage of, and it's less of a authentic approach to like meeting someone for the first time.
Yeah, that's a great tip too. Another thing that comes to mind is so with coworkers, if you switch jobs and you go move on to other things, a great way to keep in touch is like I kind of stopped doing this, but I used to do this, but I'll send like an email like once or twice a year, just kind of like talking about like what projects I worked on or what happened in that year. If I had like a life event, I'll just like write a little paragraph and I'll like send it to a bunch of people that like I used to work with or my current coworkers, like usually on like Christmas or something. And it's great to kind of
Mm,
like get that message back. And people will like respond and be like, "Oh, it's so nice to hear from you," and then like keep the relationship going after you've
yeah.
like moved away from sharing the same space. So that's another way for
Hmm.
people to build those relationships and not have it feel so transactional.
It just goes back to, continuing to fine tune your own personal story and sharing that story with other people. So I love that. Yeah, that's great.
So I think a lot of people will be curious. So, you go to college, you have this degree, you've learned so much. So how did you go from NYU to Hollywood?
Yeah, so a lot of young people in the entertainment industry get the advice that in order to be successful, you have to be an assistant at a talent agency at some point. And so that was the first job I ever had right out of college. I started, I think it was like the week after I graduated, and I worked at a talent agency in New York. And honestly, it was a nightmare. It was almost like, I don't know if you remember the first time you saw Devil Wears Prada and you saw like um, Meryl Streep's character, Miranda Priestley, and just
Hmm.
how she was
Yeah.
so talented and so wonderful, but also just like people were terrified of her and the
Hmm.
environment was just so toxic. That's pretty much how my job was. I was always going home crying. I just hated it. I also, when I was a student, I was just so creative and my schedule was so flexible. I would, go paint in the park. I would go to a fashion show. I'd go to a concert. Like I was just always doing a million fun things. And so just sitting in an office building all day, like staring at a screen, like I was like, this is not the vibes. And so I wasn't there very long. And I remembered an internship that I had had when I was in school, and it was at Nickelodeon. And that internship was very formative because I grew up loving animation, especially, we lived in a golden age of Nickelodeon, Disney, Cartoon Network. Like we just had a wealth of programs when we were kids. And so that internship, unlike a lot of internships where you just kind of like get stuck in a room and you don't really do much, we had a chance to meet with execs in every department. We got to take drawing classes with like, world class animators, and just it was a really like hands on educational program. And so I decided that I really wanted to get back into animation. And so I applied for a job at DreamWorks Television, which at the time was like a 2 months old TV studio. Now it's been around for like 10 years, but at the time it was brand new. And I made my first move from New York back to Los Angeles. I say my first because I've been back to and from LA like 5 times since then.
Mm-hmm.
But it was my first big move a few months after I graduated. And it was, it's so crazy going back to that time in my head because I was making no money. My commute was like over an hour. It was a really, really tough time. I think, trying to live the dream, but at the same time, it was an incredible opportunity, a wonderful company, great leadership. We had to create 10 brand new kids shows in like 18 months. So it was like a huge, undertaking. So we're really busy. And from that point forward, I actually did three more animation jobs in a row after working at DreamWorks. And so it was really cool that I was able to find my footing in a sector of the industry very early on. But I think um, just having, again, like that focus and making sure that every job kind of made sense with what I was doing and they were starting to like be linked together. It's difficult in the industry because there's no trajectory in the same way that, like, for example, if you want to be a doctor, every single person is going to, go to medical school and then they're going to do their residency. And, it's like, it's a process. It's not the same with entertainment. There's no guarantee that if you do a commercial, you'll get into a TV show and then you'll get to do a movie. It just doesn't work like that. And so, even on the business side, although there are levels, from like assistant all the way up to like, EVP or president of the department. It's still not that simple to make sure that like every job is actually going to lead to like a promotion and things like that. So I had to be very innovative and I moved around a lot. I only stayed at each company for like 6 months to 2.5 years early in my career because I didn't want to get pigeonholed. I didn't want to hit a glass ceiling and I wanted to move up quickly. So I did a lot of like sticking and moving early in my career.
No, I think that's a great angle to maybe approach it because I don't know why, and it's I don't think it's just entertainment because it's true in engineering too. You kind of have to move companies and like make like drastic changes with the role that you have, even if it's like somewhat not related and whatever it may be, to get those like promotions or to like progress, and especially if you're really ambitious and you're trying to get to the next level. So I know you kind of like mentioned a little bit about toxic environments. Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about maybe how that played out. Like, how did you get out of it? Like, what was maybe some like suggestions on how to deal with toxic environment?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Unfortunately, Hollywood is known for toxicity. It's strange because it's a lot of times it's smoke and mirrors, right? It's a lot of like beautiful, pretty, shiny, wonderful things to your face, but then behind closed doors, there's a lot of greed, there's a lot of, manipulation, there's a lot of just politics involved with all of these jobs. And so I didn't realize that coming into it. That's again not something that people really talk about. And so I came into it not necessarily, I wouldn't say naive, but just like energetic, hopeful, optimistic, empathetic, kind. And a lot of people who are successful in Hollywood do not emit those qualities. And so something that I really had to learn is a few things. I think you have to over communicate with people. A lot of the issues that I was facing really early in my career was just because of like misunderstandings or, not proper communication, or saying something in a way that made someone else not feel like they were valued or heard. Like it's like subtle nuances of things. And so I realized that I had to be very, very careful, even like what I put in writing versus what I said to someone face to face. Just being very, very vigilant in those ways. Because if you write anything down, it can be shared with anybody and taken out of context, things like
Right.
that. And so,
Yeah.
um, and then also, you be the kind of coworker that you want, so you want to be the kind of colleague who doesn't talk over someone in a meeting, or if someone does say a good idea, you don't then take that good idea and run with it. You make sure you're giving proper attributions. You speak kindly of people when they're not in the room. If you're someone who's a manager, I mean, that's like a whole its own conversation, but how to really like effectively manage someone so that you're not micromanaging, but you're also allowing room for like growth and improvement and opportunity. So there's a lot of layers to it, but I also know that I've faced a lot of career related trauma in a lot of my roles, unfortunately. And so I also just had to learn to have like a bit of a thicker skin and have a lot of confidence and speak up for myself. Being Black, being queer, being a woman, like there's so many microaggressions that you face, especially in corporate environments. And so um, I also started a couple like inner office organizations. So, for example, I worked at TBS for a few years and I started an organization there called Feminist Fridays. And basically, at the company, they had all of these employee resource groups, but they all felt a little bit boring. They were a little bit corporate. They were
Right.
just a little stuffy. And they just, I went to a couple of these meetings and they just like handed out pamphlets and that was pretty much it. I was like, I don't know
Right.
what we're learning here.
Yeah.
So we started this organization and basically it was like the opposite of these groups. They were like fun, they were useful. We did like self defense classes and screenings and panels and community service drives and just all kinds of fun stuff. But the whole
Right.
goal was like if you are a woman identifying employee and you want a chance to like meet other women identifying employees and mentor each other and just have communion and just enjoy each other's company. You can come to Feminist Fridays. And it was really, really cool because a lot of senior leaders also were invested and got involved. And so it felt like, when higher leadership is, giving you a vote of confidence and they're showing up and they're co-hosting events and things like that. It makes some of like the younger, even more shy employees or employees that might not ordinarily interface with some of those more senior executives, they just feel more welcomed and more included. And so I guess that's been something that I've done at a lot of my jobs too, is if I ever don't feel included, like I realize I'm not probably not the only one. And so I kind of help create spaces for that inclusion and camaraderie. So yeah, that's definitely something that I've worked on because no one wants a toxic environment. We work at these jobs so much of our time and our energy and our commitment. And it creates for more productive, happier workers if, the environment is more conducive to happiness and support.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the name too, Feminist Fridays, and it's a great idea. And I think that's a great way to connect with your coworkers and be able to see people who are maybe, doing the things that you want to do. And sometimes that's what it takes. And you can feel so isolated sometimes in certain jobs. Um, and I'm sure you've, gone through this too, for myself, but there's generally not a lot of women in engineering. So I've definitely been like the only girl in a room. And it's not that there aren't other women in the company. There are, there's just, significantly less in numbers. So being able to have that space where you can actually connect with someone that you have something in common with, and even if it's like, not just, gender, like there could be so much more that you be, more comfortable asking your female coworkers about like whatever is like going on and how to maybe address it, or maybe you're struggling with like advocating for yourself. I've noticed that's something that women are not very good at, and I know I've worked on improving
Mm-hmm.
myself in that and like speaking up more. And you also need someone who's maybe, be able to like come to your presentations and candidly tell you, hey, you should do this better, or like, don't say
Mm-hmm.
sorry. Like have quite a few like younger women who are part of my team now, and I have to constantly tell them, don't say sorry. Like, sometimes you need someone to just coach you through little things like that. And it's like, if you don't maybe have that in your immediate team and you have this organization that you can participate in, and that's how you make those connections, you're going to make your life a lot more efficient, and, you're going to feel that like community within your workplace that maybe you didn't feel otherwise. So that's great that you did that. I really love that. And I think that's a great way for women to help each other, as well as like give back to the younger generation. So I know you're a very creative person and you've had various projects that you've worked on, and I'm sure, sometimes things can get really compounded and you maybe get into ruts. How do you get out of a rut? Give us some tips.
Yeah, you have so many great questions. So it's a few different things. I'll say, because I am an artist, I consider myself an artist before anything else, before being an executive or producer or whatever other hat I'm wearing. I'm an artist. And so I think that it's really, really critical that I just stay inspired. And so if I'm in any sort of like creative rut or writer's block or, whatever version of that, I look to another medium. I think to be more specific, if you're a television writer and all you do is watch television, like I don't really think you're feeding yourself as an artist the way that you should or in all of the ways you could be. So, I would say get away from the screen and go look at like go to a visual art gallery or go listen to like a new music album that you haven't heard or go to like a poetry night. I personally have found that being able to be influenced by different types of artists and different mediums is so, so inspiring for me. And so I'm always reading like 5 books at once. I hear new music almost every day. I'm like constantly seeking out new art that's like not necessarily film and TV. Um, and also, like, don't just consume things that are new. I think Hollywood, especially, has like a recency bias where they'll either talk about projects that are from like the 1950s or the last 5 years. And then it's like everything else is kind of lost in the middle. And so I highly encourage you to seek out projects from other decades, artists that came before you, because there's so many stories that I'm sure you haven't heard, or, a different way of shooting something or approaching something creatively. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful way to inspire your art is to, yeah, see what artists came before you and are also like in your current working class as well.
I love that, and I love, expanding your it's the scope of what you're looking at. It makes me think of like my personal like love and obsession with like Audrey Hepburn movies, and that's clearly not from my generation. And I don't
Hmm.
know why, like I just love those movies. Like I love Funny Face, and I just love that era and like the way movies were made and like the way that certain things were portrayed. Yeah, I don't know. I love that. And I think changing mediums is a great way. I always like have this thing where if I'll like move around, especially when I was working from home. I'll work at the dining table, I'll work at my desk, I'll work at the couch, I'll work in my balcony. Like
Mm.
there's something about like movement. I think that helps your brain to kind of maybe like refresh.
Yes. Yes, yes. Oh, that's a really, really great one. I mean, and this answer definitely is like from a place of privilege, but also travel. I'm like one of my most inspired selves if I'm outside of my comfort zone. And so, especially out of the country. I mean, city to city within the States
Yeah.
is cool too, because it's just switching up your routine. But really, when I leave the country and I'm like forced to speak a different language or, take public transportation in a way that I haven't explored before, trying new foods, like meeting locals. Like I'm a very much like off the beaten path kind of traveler. And so, yeah, I feel like that's another way. I can be gone for a week or 2 weeks and come back and just feel so refreshed and have a new perspective, and just like a new, almost like source of energy from traveling. And so that's definitely another way to get creative as well, is just take yourself out of your environment for an hour, for a day, for a week, however long you can.
I love that. Okay,
Hmm.
I have a slightly more difficult question for you, but I'm sure
I'm
you'll be able
ready.
to relate. Okay.
Let's do it.
So the definition of success has evolved and changed, and I think been even dismantled in some ways. What is your definition of success?
You know, it's something that I haven't thought about for a long time. So I don't have a quick answer, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think success, it's so multifaceted for me. When I was young, I used to look at success um, more literally, right? It was the job title, it was the status, it was you know, my salary, it was all of those like more tactile things. But
Yeah.
now success to me looks like balance. It looks like, being able to not just find time to spend time with friends and family, but like prioritizing that time and then building work around life. It's something that I'm grateful that I'm at the place in my career where I can do that. It's so much harder when you're first starting out. But it's like I'm a newlywed, spending time with my wife, our family, like that's just so important to me. And I think being able to, yeah, make time for both is just really, really important. And I also think success is health. As someone who's had a lot of health issues over my life, there's been moments where my health has like affected my job performance, or affected like my socialization, being with my friends. Like, it's definitely been a roadblock for me before. And so just making sure that like my wellness, my self-care game is like on 100, or not 100, maybe 70%. Is really important to me too. And so I think, being able to like adequately care for myself and my loved ones, that's what success looks like. Yes, the career stuff is great as well, and it definitely keeps me motivated and inspired. But I think the personal side of my life, being a source of happiness and joy, is what real success looks like, and something that I'm really, really proud of, and I've worked hard to attain for sure.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think that's something definitely to aspire to. And to add a little bit to that, I think success can also feel like, something where to a point in life where you're doing things that makes you happy. But the flip side of that is, even if you're doing something that you love, there's going to be days where you hate doing it. And I think those days are the most important, that you actually go and do what you intended to do. Because sometimes it's a process. Like you just have to have to have like the will and the confidence and like the drive to do something when you don't feel like it. That's when
Hmm.
you're actually doing something that's really important to you. Because if you
Yeah.
quit in that moment, then maybe that's not the right thing for you.
Yeah, no, that's so, so true. And I had a moment like that really recently. Back in May, I got let go from my job, and, it was due in large part to the WGA strike. Well, now it's the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strike, but at
Right.
the time, just the writer's strike. But regardless of the reason, I was out of work, and it was, not something that I knew that it was possible, but it still happened like very abruptly. And it was during a time when, the industry was like 80% shut down, and hadn't been that shut down since COVID, and no one was really working, and there were no jobs available, and everyone was getting laid off. So it was just like, a very scary time, like at the beginning of the summer. Um, and it was one of those moments where I wouldn't say that I hated what I was doing, but I definitely felt discouraged. I felt like, as someone who has started over many times, I felt like, oh, here I am again after a year at this job, like forced to start over again, and pick
Yeah.
up the pieces and really just figure out like how am I going to make an income and, support my family, do all those things. But it was a moment of like reminding myself, you're built for this. You've done this a million times. Another organization that I started is called The Plug, and it's basically for Black creatives that live in LA, but specifically executives and agents and managers, attorneys, like people who are on the business side. And most of the organization is all about helping people get jobs. It's like 80% of what we do, and so it's like almost 500 people now, and I've been running it for about 6 years. And so in that moment, I was like, you've helped so many people get jobs, turn those resources on yourself and see what happens. And so, yeah, I think reminding yourself who you are and what you've accomplished is really, really important in those moments when you feel low, or you feel lost, or you feel confused, or you have to start over. Um, yeah, it's like, girl, you're built for this. So, do what you got to do. So, yeah, that's definitely, that positive self-talk is a big, big part of who I am for sure.
Yeah, I know that's an amazing reminder, because being kind to yourself and less critical of yourself is a skill that I know that I've had to build and like learn. It's not something that comes naturally to most people, I would say, but that's an important
Yeah.
skill to develop. So like hearing about your experience, which I knew a little bit about, um, I want to ask you. So beginning of the summer, that was, a setback for you. It kind of threw you off the path that you were going. How did you, I know you kind of spoke to it a little bit, but tell me more about how you dealt with that setback, and maybe go a little bit deeper on how you can maybe advise people on how to get past setbacks and past, quote unquote failures, and or maybe like turning your failures into success. How do you do that?
Yeah. So it's a few things. I think one thing that I did very, very quickly is fine tune my tools, right? And so I hadn't really redesigned my resume in a while. And so, I'd like added to it, but like fully redesigning it really went a really long way. So I did that before I even was officially let go because kind of like, there was some whispers once the strike had started. Um, you know, Redesigning my LinkedIn, making sure all of that was really up to date so that when I did start reaching out to my network, which is a huge, huge way that I was able to kind of like, flip the script, so to speak. Everything was so polished. If people said, send me your resume, I had the PDF ready to send, in 20 seconds. I looked at different industries too. Like for example, I had a friend who told me to look into the gaming industry because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's growing year over year, and in a lot of ways, there are similarities to gaming from the storytelling side as there are to film and TV. Um, I ended up not wanting to pursue gaming once I learned more information. However, I reached out to like some recruiters at some of the bigger companies, both domestically and internationally, started doing more research. So, it keeps you busy, right? I think it's so easy to just feel kind of like immobilized or stuck in those moments. But every single day, I made sure I was doing something to kind of move the needle along. I went through all of my contacts, on my phone, on my emails, and just started reaching out to people, that I hadn't, connected with in a while. I think COVID made it difficult to keep in touch with people, but in a lot of ways, it also made it easier to get back in touch with people because people just understand that life has been happening. And so I used it as an opportunity to not just reach out to new people, but also, people that I had known before. Um, I think so many people, for whatever reason, don't think to rely on their network in those moments. I think sometimes it really feels like um, when you're in a low career moment that it's just like it's an isolating moment.
Really?
Um, but I think if you kind of step outside of yourself for a moment and realize like you're not the only one going through this, other people are trying to pivot and move all the time. And if your industry can have ebbs and flows. And so I think the more you're like vulnerable and transparent and open with people and also just open to new opportunities, they will definitely come your way. So yeah, it was just a matter of like letting people know that I was looking for a new job and what I was looking to do. And the other thing I did, which is different than something that I'd done before, I connected with two different people, both on LinkedIn, who were sort of career coaches, but not traditional. One of the conversations that I'll highlight in particular, she was somebody who was more focused on like, how do you drill back into your passions and what is holding you back? Is it a voice in your head? Is it past experiences? Like, what is it? And then how can you kind of break through to get back to where you really want to be? And so it was almost more like talking to a therapist than talking to a coach. And, it just was such an insightful conversation. I feel like the questions she asked were very interesting. And it allowed me time to just kind of like sit with my thoughts and really process, well, what am I looking for? And what are my non-negotiables? And so that when a new opportunity did come, I was super ready for it. Not just from like a my bank account needs a check kind of way, but in a like I am like mentally, physically, emotionally prepared to begin a new job because it takes a lot, when you're starting over again. And so yeah, so those are the steps that I took. It was like a very I basically worked full time at trying to find a new job.
Yeah, no, certainly finding a job is a job in itself. But something that comes to mind that a lot of my professors at USC always kind of drill into us is um, your network is your net worth. And that's something that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a lot of people don't realize, but building those relationships and having and leveraging those relationships, that's so important. So I'm glad that, you threw that in as a tip.
That's a big part of what I do with the plug is making sure that people have, the exact hiring manager's email and know exactly like who to reach out to and things like that because that one-to-one person to person relationship can change everything. You know what I mean? That one email, that one phone call, that one, direct message. can lead to your next opportunity. So yeah, I definitely think the art of reaching out to people and maintain those relationships is definitely something to work on. And then also like knowing appropriateness, right? When you're doing this and, knowing the boundaries, I think is also really important. Like, for example, working in entertainment, like nobody takes unsolicited submissions. Nobody. That means if you have a script idea or something, do not just email it to someone that you don't know. But for whatever reason, I don't know why people don't know that because everybody says it and has been saying it for
Yeah.
decades.
Hmm.
But I still every day get an email or a script or a deck or whatever from somebody that I don't know. And that's just such a turnoff, right?
Hmm.
Or another example would be sending me a message that would be better on LinkedIn to like my personal Instagram. Like it's a little weird, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you have enough information on your page or we have friends in common or something, that's totally fine. Um, but someone looking to like pitch me a script from sending me an Instagram message, like I hate that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
just
That's
knowing
not the
how to
right
like be
place.
appropriate and like, yeah, like how to,
Hmm.
understand people's boundaries and, just being respectful and all those things, I think is really, really important as well. And sometimes people get so excited about meeting a person and what they could potentially do for them that they kind of forget just like that etiquette of, how to meet someone for the first time.
Yeah. No, that's a great reminder. So let's break it down more because there's a lot of people out there hustling. So how do
Hmm.
we help people understand? Maybe like let's talk about how do you take a maybe to a yes? If you're getting a no, that's a no, but sometimes you get a maybe. How do you take the maybe to a yes?
Yeah, it depends on where it's coming from. Um, for sure. I think I'm trying to think. Maybe we'll give like a specific example. Okay, I'll give you an example from my specific career. So, one time that you might hear a maybe is if you're a writer and you're pitching an idea, and the person doesn't say yes, they don't buy it right away, but they also don't say no. And there's like, it's clear that there's like a door or a window that's cracked. I think the first most important thing is getting the most specific feedback that you can. Every now and then you get kind of like a nebulous answer and you don't necessarily know why. And then some people just don't ask why. And then you never know, right? So I think getting some immediate feedback, whether it's like, oh, I really loved the idea, but I feel like your characters aren't developed enough. Or I really love the characters, but I'm not so sure about the tone. Or I really love the world, but I feel like you need some help on the story. Like those are very, very specific helpful, pieces of feedback that you can then take and retool your work and then ask if you can resubmit it. And that's happened
Mhm,
to me before on the buying side. And I have bought
mhm,
something after saying maybe earlier on. And so after they've like taken my feedback and applied it. And then the other piece of it too is just like knowing your audience well and continuing to know your audience, right? And so if, for example, let's say it's animation, right? It's a kid show. If Nickelodeon says, no, it's not a good fit for us. It's a little bit too, you know, polished and clean. We like things that are a little bit like messier and a little weirder. So maybe that's a no for Nickelodeon, but it's also sounding like it could be a really great fit for Disney, right? And
mhm.
so I think also knowing your audience and realizing that, maybe it's not the right time and right place for one person, but it could be a perfect time and place for somebody else. So just really knowing where all of your opportunities lie. And then the last piece I will say is staying connected with the person. I think so many people get connected to a brand and not the individual, but it's really the individual's taste that is really going to come into bear, right? So what I mean by that is, I've seen so many executives. Basically, it's like musical chairs where over the course of 2, 5, 10 years, executives move around and around and around, right? And so the person might have said no while they were working at HBO, but now they're at Hulu. And if they really loved meeting you and loved your ideas, it could be a perfect time for them now at a new company. So that's the other thing to be aware of is like, and then on the flip of it, if they said no at HBO when they were there and they left, now could be a great time to take it back because now there'll be a new person in charge and new mandates and new tastes, right? So I think all of those things are really important. I guess the last thing I'll say is just being really adaptable. For example, there's a million projects and examples of stories where they were pitched as TV shows and everyone said no until it was pitched as a movie and someone said yes. Or it was a book and then it was better as a podcast or whatever. So just being open to, if you love the idea and you love the creatives around it, be open to like exploring different formats or, just different approaches to how to tell the story. I think that flexibility, and especially for creatives, is really, really important as well.
That's great. I love that. So, know your timing, know your audience, and be flexible. I think that's
Hmm.
definitely fair, definitely doable, and definitely, I think, universal to anybody out there who is, trying to create anything. So this actually makes me want to ask you this particular question. There'll be times where you're really proud of something and you really love a story or the plot line or movie or whatever it may be, but maybe it didn't do so well in the larger market. Maybe it didn't reach enough people. Is financially considered not successful. What can you share about maybe a moment like that with your career and if you had a project you're really proud of and maybe what you learned from that?
Yeah, it happens. It happens all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
There's been several projects where I've shot a pilot and then it didn't get picked up to series. And that's tough. That happened to me this year. It happened to me early in my career. It's happened, I don't even know how many times, five, six, seven times.
Mhm.
And so it's tough, when you've put
Yeah.
in the work and you believe in a project and you've even gotten the money to like hire a cast and hire writers and actually shoot the thing, and then it still doesn't get, beyond that first episode. What I will say is every single experience, you're still learning so much, right? I think even in the projects that didn't get made, I still have great relationships with those writers, with the
Mhm.
actors, with the directors. I still, got practical on-set experience. I still help shape a story. I still work with the marketing team or, whatever it is. Every project is different. Um, and it's still a credit that no one can take away from you, right? So even if you do a movie and it doesn't do well, you
Yeah.
still did a movie. And a lot of movies don't even get made or, make it to have an audience. And so, everything is experience and experience cannot be taken away from you. And so, sometimes that expectation versus reality can be really
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if you can kind of manage your expectations along the way and just be open to whatever doors might open from a project, it kind of releases a little bit of like that ego from it.
Mhm.
And then also understanding that like art and business, it's so tricky, marrying the two.
Mhm.
So often artists don't even want to hang their painting on a gallery wall because they're like, well, even though I made it for people, I don't really want to hear what they have to say, right? So there's this
Yeah.
fear of sharing your work.
Mhm.
But know that like so much of art is business, right? And it's like, just because something, wasn't a commercial success, it could become a cult classic and be like everyone's, favorite weird movie or whatever, so
Totally. Yeah.
and also like there is something really beautiful in sharing your story in general. One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, and basically she's saying like, "There's no greater agony than burying an untold story inside you." And so there's just something so incredible about sharing whatever you're creating. And so even if it doesn't reach commercial success or tick all the boxes that you hope or get you nominated for an award or you get nominated you don't win or
Mhm.
whatever, just know
Yeah.
that like it's a piece of your whole story, it's a piece of who you are. And use that as a launching off point for whatever your next project is. Don't let it discourage you. If nothing, let it propel you forward.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that any quote unquote negative experience that you can turn that into a reflection of what you're learning from that and using that to, like you said, propel yourself forward into the next thing that you want to do. I'm sure you've balanced being creative and being a businesswoman. So tell me a little bit more about how what the thought process was before you started your own production company, why you started it.
Yeah, so this was the summer of 2020, and just kind of taking us all back there for a moment. It was just one of the most tumultuous times in the world, right? We're just a few months into the pandemic. We had a horrible president. There was, civil and social unrest in the country, especially, being a Black person. It was just a very, very heavy time. I had what was a dream job. I was working with Kerry Washington, and it was like everything was incredible. Yeah, it was just like, it was really one of those moments where I was like, I can't believe I'm doing what I'm doing. And yet I still wasn't feeling completely fulfilled for a variety of reasons. And I realized that to that point in my career, I had spent so much time, investing myself and my creative energy into other people, other brands, other companies. And I was like, well, what would that look like if I were to turn those resources, that energy, those relationships onto myself and, find my own voice? At that point, I'd been an executive for many years. I started producing with Carrie. Um, but it was always for other people, right? I wasn't able to be on a podcast and represent myself or, go speak on a panel and represent myself or, things like that. And I was like, I realized, like I said, I grew up on stage. I grew up in front of the camera, behind the camera, and I felt like I was sort of doing my work, but like off in the shadows. And like, I love the light, and so that was really difficult for me. And so I had to be very honest with myself and say, yes, I know this is going to be very difficult. It's going to require skills that you don't have. It's going to be very expensive. You're going to have to reintroduce yourself to everybody and build a business and figure out how to be an entrepreneur. But all of that felt worth it when put in conversation with finding my own voice and telling my own story. It all felt worth it. And so that really just became my North Star. And, leaving Carrie was a very difficult decision. I love her. I adore her. I think she's so talented and so lovely. But again, like there is nothing better than investing in yourself. And I just had to keep telling myself that over and over and over and over and over again. And I think I will for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really what came into it. It was like a moment of like, I think in 2020, a lot of people changed, whether it was like reprioritizing family or moving away from the city they lived in or changing careers. It was just kind of a moment where everyone just paused for a second and was like, well, what am I doing and what do I want to do differently? And so I had a very similar experience. And instead of just being scared, I just leaned into it and yeah, let it take me for a ride.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your honesty with what you're feeling because it is difficult to start something new, especially if you're leaving a place where you feel comfortable in. But I think that's probably like an even better sign for yourself that maybe that getting too comfortable with your environment is a sign for you that maybe you're not growing as much. So I think when you're approaching something that you're afraid of, that's when you're going to grow the most. So that
Yeah.
certainly resonates with me.
Yeah, and you know what else? Like, I'm wearing butterflies. My company's Black Monarch. Like, I love
Mhm.
a butterfly and what they
Yeah.
represent. And I think
Mhm.
there's really something very, very transformative about the feeling of butterflies, right? It's like,
Mhm.
it's that crush. It's that, it's that jump when you're skydiving, it's that feeling where you're a little bit nervous, but you're also excited. And I heard someone, I think it was a psychologist, say once that the chemicals that are released in your brain and in your bloodstream when you're scared or anxious are the exact same as when you're excited. And I thought that was so interesting because basically it's
Yeah.
like if you're a rock star and you're about to go on stage and you feel scared, if you tell yourself that you're excited, the
Yeah.
physical reaction and emotional release is exactly the same. And so
Mhm.
that's something that I've definitely carried with me. And basically, whenever I feel like scared or anxious, I'm like, you're really just
Mhm.
excited. Harness
Yeah.
it as a feeling of like enthusiasm, and don't
Mhm.
let it weigh you down as anxiousness. And it's so interesting the power of the mind and how just that little detail and that little shift can really change everything. But again, it's like the
Yeah.
exact same physical and emotional response. It's so interesting.
No, that's really fascinating. I'll have to research that more. I'm really
Isn't that
intrigued.
interesting?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, totally. And I loved your entire response because when I was listening to you, the only thing I could think about, I was like, oh my God, that is me right now. Like, I think I'm going
Yeah.
through. myself. It's a whole journey of starting to podcast and like delving into it. It's so different than anything that I've done in recent years. But it feels like I'm tapping into something that, maybe that like the whole like storytelling and like sharing and helping each other. I think that's like the community of it, all of that. I wasn't really getting it in my like, engineering career, which is totally
Mm,
fine. It has its time and place. But this whole journey, it kind of has that like mixture of me finding my voice, which is kind of the theme of like this year, basically for myself. On
mm-hmm.
top of that, like being nervous but excited, that it's such a weird feeling, but I get that all the time. But I think a good sign is if you're calm. Like even if you're nervous and
Mm,
excited but calm, I think that's my
yeah.
state. Yeah.
Oh, I just got chills when you said that. Yeah, no, it's so true. And honestly, like I'm so grateful, I'm turning 32 later this year, and it's like
Mhm.
in 32 years of life, every single day I'm still discovering something about myself that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that is so weird and so
Right.
cool. And I don't think that ever stops. And I think
Hmm.
one of my favorite qualities in any person is, again, just curiosity. And so, if you have those feelings where you're like, I don't know what this is, but it's something different, whether it turns out to be a good feeling or, a bad feeling that you want to get rid of. That's interesting. And it's definitely worth like exploring and leaning into. It's funny. I was on a trip with my wife a few weeks ago, and I was crying about something. I cry all the time.
Yeah.
And I was crying about something, but it was like happy tears, but also surprise tears. And she
Mhm.
basically was just like, feel all these feelings because not every single day you get to feel such heavy, intense emotions, and just enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like
True.
feeling something is such a gift. When I
Mhm.
think so much of the world is just numb and on autopilot. And so yeah, feel all your feelings. They're all valid. Um, and all the good, yummy, juicy ones, like soak them
Yeah.
up and enjoy it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Hmm.
replicate it when you can, for sure.
Hmm. I love that. I'm gonna put that on a sticky note.
Yeah.
We're lucky that we're in a place where we're doing something that is basically bringing life to you. It's
Mm,
kind of like being in awe of your own life. I think that's something that all of
I
us can
love that.
spend doing. Just
Yeah.
like it's like this is my life. Like
Yeah.
it's
And you
great.
know what else? I saw something the other day that I thought was like, it truly blew my mind.
Yeah.
Basically, this person was talking about how there's so many people who have residue in your life that are no longer in your life. Basically, it's like that old t-shirt from a friend, that you still wear to bed,
Yeah.
or that song that you hear that reminds you of someone you don't talk to anymore. And basically, they were like, now imagine the residue that you've left in so many lives of people that you don't even realize. You know what I mean? And so that was like really, really interesting. And you never know, how you're affecting someone, or when a kind word or you
Yeah.
sharing your story is gonna, open up someone's mind. And so I think that's the other reason to stay motivated and keep doing your podcast, and keep doing those kind of things, because you never know the ripple effect that, these kind of things can have. So I think that's also something to celebrate as well.
Love that. I think that's a great way of thinking it. 'Cause there's so many questions that I want to ask you, but I think we have time for one more. So I know you've had a lot of change this summer and you have a very exciting chapter coming up. What can you share
Yeah.
about that journey? What are you most excited?
Yeah, so I'm 2 weeks in to a new job. So exciting. I honestly can't believe it, but I got
Yeah.
my own producer deal at Netflix, which has literally been my dream company for at least 5 years. And basically, having my own producer deal means that I'm able to develop projects that are currently on the slate, but also bring in my own projects as a producer. And I'm specializing in animated feature films. So it's like this crazy full circle moment of like that first internship, I think 12 years ago at Nickelodeon, and then now, being able to produce animated movies for Netflix. And what I'm most excited about, two things. I would say one is the creative leader. Her name is Karen Tolliver, and she is like, oh, she's like Beyonce. Seriously, like
Wow.
everything she says is so inspiring. She's so brilliant. She is so forward thinking. She's so culture shifting. She's, innovative, she's inspiring, and everyone that she touches is so happy to work with her. And she's a Black woman too. So I'm like, on top of it, I'm like, girl, like you see me, I see you. Like
Yeah.
having this experience is
Hmm.
once in a lifetime. So I'm excited
Hmm.
about that. And then I think there's also a lot of kids in my life. I don't even know anymore, 12, 13 nieces and nephews. I have so many, I lost count after 10.
Yeah.
But being able to work on shows and or specifically movies that the kids in my life can watch and enjoy, is going to be really, really cool too. A lot of the projects that I've made over the years are more like for adults, or like young adults or whatever. And so being able to like just see the wonder in like a little kid's eyes that you love, that is watching something that you created really just for them is going to be very, 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 very cool. So I'm excited about that.
No, that's amazing. Two things I want to add to what you said. Isn't it like amazing when you walk into a room and you see another woman of color and you're just like, yes, like you love it. That moment, like when
It
I just want to
is
celebrate the wins.
wild.
Yeah.
It's wild. And like between us and the audience, I've only met one white man since I've worked there in
Mhm.
2 weeks. Only
Yeah.
one.
Wow. That's
And he's
amazing.
not in a leadership position. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, I've never experienced this before. I'm so used to it just being like a boys club all day, every day.
Totally.
And so it is so cool to see like so many people of color, so many people who have like different gender identities and sexual orientations. Like it's truly, an inclusive, diverse environment. And I think a lot of people talk about it or like it's like lip service or like,
Yeah.
a buzzword at this point, but like they've really done the work to make sure that the workplace is very reflective of the world around us. And I think, you
Totally.
know, when you're creating mass media, it's so critical that you really do that. And so I'm happy to work somewhere where it's like, oh my gosh, you never know what's going to happen, but you know it's going to
Yeah.
be exciting.
Yeah, no, that is exciting. I'm, really happy that we're able to celebrate that win and, enjoy it for the moment. But there's so much more that, we as a community and as a country in the world that we need to do to make the world a better place. And I think that in your own circle of, like you mentioned, being able to create different movies, different productions for the younger generation, and I'm sure you're going to do things that is going to inspire the next generation. And I'm really excited to see the impactful projects that you're going to work on. I have complete faith in you that you're going to completely kill it, and I can't wait to hear more about
Thank
it.
you.
I
Thank
have,
you.
yes, thank you so much for coming on. I have one quick closing question that I've been asking all of
Yes.
my guests. So, what is your word of the year or this chapter of your life?
Ooh. Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness. Let's do chapter instead of the year, because the year's, oh my gosh, we're more than half over, which
I
is so
know.
weird. So
Yeah.
weird. It's about to be Christmas.
Hmm.
Let's see. Um, my word for this chapter, honestly, the first word that came to me that really resonated is abundance. I think
I love that.
there's been a lot of moments in my life, in my career, where I've just been planting seeds and also, like tending to those seeds. I think there's a lot to be said for like watering and, pruning and just rotating, like, however much you want
Mhm.
to extend this metaphor. I think it takes a
Yeah.
lot to really cultivate opportunities in relationships, but I feel like this season is really harvest season, and I feel like a lot of the fruits of my labor are really coming into fruition. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think this season is abundance, and I'm excited to keep, yeah, reaping the benefits of all of the hard work and just love and
Mhm.
positive energy that I've sown over the years. So yeah, this is a celebration kind of season for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I hope all the seeds that you planted, you finally get to be able to see the outcome of that. And I love that metaphor. I think I use it quite often too. And abundance is a great word, in my opinion. Being in an abundance state of mind, I think that's the goal. You should never be in a scarcity state of mind. I think you get what you reflect. So I hope you
Yeah,
get all the
that's so true.
abundance that you're putting out there in return. Um, is there anything that you want to share as a closing thought?
Yeah. I would say as a closing thought, I wanna kind of bring up something that Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, said once. And he basically was talking about the space between the television screen and the child, and how,
Mhm.
as a programmer, as a creator, he is responsible for that space. And that's really what I want to impart. Whether you work in
Yeah.
television or film or something completely different, you are responsible for the space between yourself and you fill in the blank. You the audience,
Mhm.
your viewers, your listeners, your clients, your friends, your family. You're responsible for that space. And so just be very intentional with what you're saying, what you're sharing, what you're putting out into the world, because we really have the power to tilt the Earth's axis towards good.
Mhm.
And if you're not doing that, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Let's all lead with intention and kindness. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so, so much for coming on. This has been amazing. I wish I could talk to you for days on. I think we could both just
We
keep going back and forth.
can.
This has been amazing.